Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This being a show where it's about crime dramas that I watch. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Perry Mason. First and foremost, I'm going to talk about something I got completely wrong last episode. Not in just a sense of like, oh, I thought something wrong. It's like, no, I just like what we saw, I got completely wrong. Like, for example, like what I mean is like at the end with the people behind the kidnappings, I thought one of them was that. I didn't realize that was a different person. I thought it was the same person who was, playing Matthew Dodson. I thought it was that same person. So that's why, like, I thought he was one of the people involved that, the dirty cop ended up killing or whatever. I was completely and utterly wrong. So I wanted to kind of throw that out there. Because obviously, it turns out like, well, for one, we get our like introduction kind of fully to the church in this episode. Obviously, we get introduced to Sister Alice and kind of her sermons and everything. And obviously it's hard to say whether it's genuine or not because it seems a little disingenuous in certain regards where it's like when she's meeting with, Matthew and Emily and like, oh, about the tragedy that they've been through. And then I forgot who it was. Someone was offering to pay for like all the funeral arrangements and stuff like that. I mean, because even interestingly enough, there was that moment later on in the episode where it's kind of like, all right, they're trying to like, all right, so we should put this person here, this person there. It's like, oh, would you mind if we moved your wife because we want to put the mayor up here? And I was wondering, that actor that was a part of that, I was like, where have I seen him in recently? And I was like, oh yeah, it has to be like The Blacklist. It was the most recent thing I saw. The actor that was kind of calling it out. It's like basically, why don't we just have this whole thing at the cemetery? Just because it's like. Because it's almost like you're almost making a spectacle of this. Why not make even more of a spectacle at it, considering the fact of the matter is there's already so much already going on. There's like the husbands have been arrested, for murder, which obviously Baggertley is kind of Baggertley is like, no, that's not, he's found Christ like all of us here, so there's no way, he could have done this atrocity or whatever. And it's so interesting because it almost seems like Sister Alice is so focused on her own speech. She's like, oh yeah, let me use that line, and obviously she uses it in her speech later on, and it just seemed like they were so focused on everything else and not just this tragedy. It just like they were putting on a show essentially. So, which is obviously interesting timing because obviously this is airing kind of coinciding with like Penny Dreadful, City of Angels, where you have like Sister Molly, kind of in a similar vein. I thought it was just kind of just interesting aesthetically. Then we also see, Matthew getting arrested because at first they kind of brought him in for questioning and stuff like that. But then after everything, like, because we got introduced to Officer Drake, which I've also got that confused. Like the actor who plays Pete, his name is Shay. I was thinking his name was Chris. Chris Chalk is the actor who plays Officer Drake. He's the one who he most recently, the thing I kind of best know him for is playing Lucius Fox on Gotham, is like the most recent thing I can think of. I remember seeing him in. So it was he ended up coming across the scene, which I thought kind of rewinding a little bit, I thought it was interesting, the whole like domestic dispute he was dealing with, because the lady is like, I want this man out of my house, and obviously Officer Drake kind of has to play peacekeeper, and the husband comes out with a shotgun in hand because he believes his wife is stepping out on him. But like Officer Drake's like, no, she was at the church with me, like we had punch or we had like something to drink, so it's like we saw each other, isn't that right? Because he just assumed like she was out stepping out on him because she wasn't there. And then it's like, oh. And he's like, just hand me the shotgun. Luckily, the situation got diffused, but someone got Drake to go check out like the scene, which is like obviously everything that went down last episode. So he found the bodies, and then he follows the blood to where the next body should be down, like because the guy tried to jump but he fell. But when he looks, the body's gone. So it's like, wait, oh, so I guess this leads nowhere. So all that evidence found is what led them to arresting Matthew, because it's like, oh, now they're associating him with everything that went down. Like, oh, those are the kidnappers and you are a part of all of this. Because obviously they're saying like he has a motive because he has his gambling debts and everything. But at the same time, there's the whole situation of it's EB's trying to be like, what would make you think that he would have the money? And it's like, yeah, you're right. Why would they think he has $100,000? Like, he's just some grocer or everything, right? But then they find out Baggertley Robert Patrick's character, I keep butchering names, sorry, ends up being revealed to be his father, and that's been something that was kind of tight-lipped, and obviously it caught all of them by surprise, and because of this, it now looks like he had means and opportunity, and this is why, so it looks like he was trying to take advantage of this situation, now knowing who his father is and everything, and now it puts the whole investigation in a certain eye for both Perry and EB, because it's like, at no point did you say that he was your son. He's like, I didn't tell a lie. Yes, I might have omitted truths, but he never was like, I never lie. But it's like, you're making it seem like you had no connection. Just like, oh, these are people from the church, when in fact it's your son. But for him, it's like he only found out recently, like in the past couple of years, that Matthew was his son, because it was some stuff from his past that, like, apparently the mother never told him until, like, or rather, he had mistakes in his past. So I don't know whether I don't know if he was explaining it as a thing of, hey, I had no idea about this because the mother didn't tell me, or whether he just didn't take responsibility. I think it's more so the former rather than the latter. But it's a situation of, like, his son, it's like, all right, I'm going to be here, I'll give you the money to, do something. But the fact of the matter is, you need to kind of basically join the church and find God, essentially. And he did. And obviously the whole thing just makes Perry feel just like, because they've been going about this investigation the wrong way, because you've kind of started them off on the wrong foot by not telling them everything, which even he's like, there's certain, I told you what was necessary at the time, so it's not like everything needs to be told. Or should we bring up, and he starts bringing up Perry's past, about him being in the military, like the discharge that he got, it's like, oh, that's only for coloreds and gay people. And so it's like, are you, and you're not colored, so it's a situation of Perry. It's a situation where, like, throughout the episode we get bits and pieces of his past, especially during the war and everything. And but obviously, like, that was kind of, I personally thought that was a little douchey for him to come at, this is the guy you're hired to kind of help, with this whole investigation, and you're kind of pissing him off. I wouldn't do that. The guy that's trying to help with this whole thing. I thought that was but I guess for him, it's like, you're coming at me, so I have to come at you. But that also speaks volumes. The fact is, so much about his past. But I guess I don't know how much of a soldier's history is public knowledge. I feel like a lot of that, I mean, obviously the lawyers were able to kind of drag that up during court. That's lawyers. I'm not too surprised. But for someone from our church, I think that speaks volumes. Like, but I guess he has enough pull and reaching connections that he's able to make that happen. Maybe that's kind of what that's implying. But whatever the case may be. But what this whole thing also comes down to is, like, obviously there's now an eyewitness saying that they saw, Matthew. But the thing is, before they couldn't tell who it was, but now all of a sudden they can say, like, oh no, it was definitely Matthew. So it's like, obviously the cops are, like, coercing some, not the confessions, but, like, testimonies from witnesses. So it's like, so he goes to talk to Emily, and it's trying to ask Emily, like, could have possibly been Matthew, which she's like, no, there's no way he would have been involved, and then there's a neighbor next door who seems like she's a bit nosy, and obviously Perry goes to talk to her, and she's like, yeah, like, the fact is, her being on the phone all the time. He's like, wait, what? You saw her on the phone? She's like, yeah, all the time. Like, the fact of the matter is, because of what her husband's not home a lot, I think she kind of gets lonely and wants to talk to anybody, and it's like, oh, look, and they turn and look, and she's on the phone again, and then it's like, what's that all about? So they're trying to figure out, like, Perry's trying to figure out, like, who she's talking to. So he ends up following her and Della when they go out to eat, because at that time, like, they were supposed to be doing, funeral arrangements, and obviously it's too much to ask a mother to, set up, having to pick out a casket for her young child. Like, that's, so EB took over that whole thing. What's also interesting too, like, with this whole thing, speaking of EB, like, him and the DA, like, there's back and forth there. Like, to me, it seems like EB doesn't have the most altruistic, like, thing of, like, oh, I'm trying to solve this case. It's like, I'm trying to get justice. It just seems like, because he makes it seem like it's personal against the DA, because it's like, oh, he thinks he's going to outsmart me. Nope. Like, that's what it seems like, especially in that scene later on, between him and Perry. But it's just kind of like, and he leaves Perry and goes over there with them, and then just like, it just seems like you're schmoozing with this like group. I don't know. It just makes EB come off a little sleazy in my opinion. It feels like that's his motive for doing all this. It's just like, oh, like he's kind of challenged me, so all I care about now. Yeah, I'm sure justice, but it makes it seem like it's more so about like, oh, it's personal and petty. Is what that kind of feels like. I don't know. That's just kind of my perspective on it. But Perry ended up, getting the number that Emily was calling, because she was even in the restaurant with Della, and she ended up kind of getting away from her and calling it. So Perry ends up getting the number, and he ends up tracking down the place, and it turns out it's a dude. It seems like he killed himself with a shotgun, but then I'm immediately like, oh, this is the dude I mistook for Dobson. And there's even a suicide note saying like, oh yeah, you'll find the other two involved here. It was, I couldn't live with what I did. And then also Perry notices that his mouth, that it's like, oh, there's some of his mouth is kind of messed up. And I think we'll get to that soon enough, because with the Drake situation. Well, let's tie it in, because basically Drake was kind of told to change his report, because he found the blood, and obviously the detectives are trying to make him go like, oh yeah, don't you think it's weird? The blood started at, it could have easily been like that's where it started and it led to the room with the dead bodies, but it's like, but Drake is like, no, with the way the blood is done, the way the blood is, it seems like it, it was someone going up those stairs, so that's where it ended rather than it started. But it's like, yeah, where did the blood lead? He's like, nowhere. And they're like, see? So, and the fact is, both of them were kind of pushing Drake to do that. I was like, so not just the partner dirty, both of them are dirty. And it also seems like the commander's dirty, because he's the one that they both went in his office, and then afterwards, it was almost like you also have to, he says it later on that Morton is the one that told him to change his statement. So it's like, obviously, like, it goes higher in the chain, this whole like corruption, so it's not just there. But at the end of the episode, we see Drake ends up going to investigate, and he finds a pair of teeth. I guess it's kind of like either because there's wiring to it, so I don't know if that's just kind of like whether he had false teeth or whether that's what that's supposed to imply. But either way, I'm sure it's like from when he hit the pavement, which like his teeth broke off, so they probably didn't see it at the time, so they ended up leaving that behind. So there is evidence, obviously, that body was there. So because I thought that was so interesting how they ended up making it look like suicide, like a murder suicide, like he killed both of them and then he killed himself out of shame. And I just thought it was interesting, because I was like, oh, like I didn't think too much of it. I was like, oh, the guy's dead. I was like, isn't it gonna look weird because he is shot in the arm and everything? So isn't that gonna? But I was like, oh, I guess not. Because I was like, I guess you don't really have to clean up the crime scene. It's like, no, they in fact cleaned up the crime scene to a certain extent to kind of put everything on him to kind of make it look like, oh, kind of fit the narrative that they needed to create, I just thought that was kind of an interesting element to it. And obviously for Perry, he doesn't kind of believe like the whole situation as it is, kind of everything laid bare on him, plus the money's burnt. So I guess like they got the money they wanted. I mean, it makes you wonder, was money always the intended motive? I mean, at least for the others, because obviously there's other people, like, it probably would have been fine if everything went according to plan, but because something went wrong, it is a situation where it's like they had to burn the money because, like, no one could have that money right now. So it's like, we might as well burn it, make it, but my point I'm trying to make is, I wonder, was this always planned to play out like this? So was money the actual motive? Or was it just kind of like a thing of like, I don't know. I'm not explaining myself well. I do apologize. I hope that's coming to go. Like, I'm wondering how much of it was planned and how much was just kind of like a, damn, it went wrong. All right, burn the money, set this whole thing up to look like this. So, because obviously the others involved in this thought they were getting money. They thought they were getting a payday, but obviously the dirty cops involved in all of this as well. So it's like, we don't know what everyone's getting out of this. But Perry also finds some letters from Emily to the victim, the dead guy, his name is George, and it turns out they were having an affair. And I thought it was so interesting, like, Perry seemed like he went after her so hard. Like, especially when he's talking to Della and EB and, Pete's in the room too. And I thought it was interesting. I was like, you're going after her a little hard. Like, is it because I think I was like, did you feel bad? Were you pissed because you got duped? Because maybe for him, it's like he started feeling bad for her. It's like, oh, this mourning mother, and he like talked to her and he felt so bad for her, and to find out she's a cheat. So it's like she's lying about that. So obviously it could be that she's lying about other things as well. But Della's the one that kept throwing out there, yeah, she might be having an affair, but she might be a cheat. It doesn't make her a killer, But obviously it's a narrative that Perry was kind of running with, and it's like, oh, she was a part of all this, which EB was like, you said that she was on the phone distracting, that George was on the phone distracting her, so how could he be the one that everyone saw that they thought was the person they saw was George? How can it be him when everyone's saying it's Matthew? But how can it be him if he's on the phone distracting Emily? And he was like, I don't know, but it's like, EB's like, yeah, you're trying to pull all this out of your ass, trying to fit this specific narrative. And it's like, that's why I'm wondering, like, why he went so hard at this like that. And obviously it's like, because he got the letters, they now can't put them back either, because he already called the cops about the body and everything. And EB's kind of stuck with him. So it's like, what do I do with these letters? Like, can't, because if he brings them up in court, he has to bring up the whole factor of, oh, where the hell did you get them? So I also love that whole thing of like, because I love that Pete was like reluctant to work with Perry again because of the debacle last episode, but also because like EB thinks of me as a degenerate. He's like, yes, but he also thinks of you as a good detective or investigator. And then it's just like, and he was like, during the back and forth, EB just looks at Pete and calls him a degenerate, and then Pete's like, see what I mean? He literally used the word. And then later on, he's also, I'm not gonna cover the expenses of a horror or something like that. Basically, he went to like a whorehouse, and he was like, I had to, that's where I was trailing someone, so I had to blend in. It's like, oh yeah, blending in, yeah. But basically it shows that, like, because obviously, like, they have a witness saying that, like, obviously they saw Matthew outside of the house. Well, at the same time, there's also witnesses that say they saw him at a game because he was gambling. So obviously not Matthew, but now even EB's like, okay, so Della doesn't believe that Emily was the one behind all this. And he's like, Perry, you don't believe that, Matthew's behind all this. And Della's like, no. And then Perry's like, I don't think they did it on purpose. Like, well, once again, it's like, whatever this was, it was never meant to be like, no, the child wasn't supposed to die. It's just like something went wrong. And he's like, I don't believe, he's just trying to figure this all out. So there's all of that. Then there's the thing at the church and everything, which I'm curious what her motives for doing what she was doing. Sister Alice, because she's doing her speech, and then she takes attention to like, oh, look at all the big name people that are here. Obviously there's the detectives, there's the DA. And it's like, you're probably only going to be here this once, so let me say this. It's like, what happened was the devil came out, walked these streets, and committed this atrocity. You guys the police are going to arrest him. The judge is going to, sentence him, and then the executioner is going to hang the devil until he breaks his neck. And that's like, I was wondering about that. Like, is that supposed to put the cops in these officials in a spotlight where it's like, oh, it's all on you to make, like, if you falter, everyone's going to turn against you because she's kind of put you in a spotlight? Or was it supposed to be a means of, because whatever she was doing, like, her mom was kind of like, what the hell was that all about? So that's what I'm trying to understand. Like, I didn't quite get her motives for why she did what she did. That's what it ended up kind of confusing me, like what she was trying to gain from that. But what's also interesting is like her and Perry meeting eyes. I'm like, do you two know each other? I mean, I don't know, like, or maybe she sees something in him. Like maybe when they locked eyes, she saw something, or maybe he looked in her eyes and saw something. I don't know. But the sad thing is, as her son is being carried out, Emily gets arrested. And I'm like, Jesus, they couldn't even wait until after the funeral, had to do it during the funeral. I was like, that's shitty. So it's a situation of obviously Della's looking back at, Perry, and it's like, and his head's down because he does feel shameful about it, because it's like, yes, he believes what he believes, but at the same time, it's like, it's a situation of like, they should have waited. And even later on, it's like EB's like, it was the right call was made. So it seems like it was Perry who did it, but at the same time, it seems like, I mean, at least he has EB's blessing on it, or at the very least, I don't, so EB's saying like, you made the right move, because at the end of the day, he's like, this gets Matthew off, but at the same time, it's like, they're not going to do anything with Emily, like some like church wife, like, there's nothing there to really say that she'd be capable of this. So he's trying, it's almost like a game of like, at the very least, like, they can't do, there's nothing there to, like, aside from these letters and stuff, like, there's nothing to really say that she's really capable of it, so it's not like they're going to go through the trouble of prosecuting her, so it's like, that's at least gives them time to kind of figure everything out, when they end up getting Matthew out, but it's still like, even Perry's like, the thing Della said still kind of sits in his head. Just because she's a cheat doesn't mean she's a killer, And as he's walking, obviously he's listening to that guy singing, and it's like reminds him of his past, in the military. And I'm assuming this is kind of what happened to where it gained him that discharge and stuff like that, because he was on the battlefield, and as we saw him at one point almost struggling because this guy almost kills him, but luckily someone saved him. But then like the gas was starting, like they were getting ready to start shooting out gas, so he backs away, but he finds some of his men on the ground injured, like to the point he kills them as a mercy, because the last thing he wants to do is make them suffer, especially if gas is coming, and so he kills them. And then there's one particular dude in particular, his leg was messed up, he was kind of foaming at the mouth, so I don't know if the gas had already gotten to him, and he was just like, Captain, he's like, please forgive me, and he shoots him. So it's like, I'm assuming like word probably came out about like, it's just like that was friendly fire. It's like, even if it was out of mercy, you still killed some of your own people. So that's what kind of led probably to his discharge and everything. So I just thought that was kind of interesting. I'm wondering, is that the only scope of that whole? Because there's that line from EB, and I talked about it in the trailer. I thought was interesting. It's like, basically you do what you have to do for the greater good type of situation. And he's like, I think you out of anyone would understand that better than anyone. So I just thought that was I'm curious, is there going to be any more to that, or is that just kind of the extent of that aspect of his life we're going to really tackle, especially considering it kind of keeps getting thrown in his face. It's the second episode that's kind of gotten thrown in his face. So I'm curious to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good